In this video, we're going to look at the Historic Team Activity tab. So what do we need to do here? Well, we're being presented with a table, and this table has a list of all the customer specialties that we've previously declared, and it has a list of all the teams that we have recently declared. So what we're looking to understand is how many calls has each of these teams made on each of these customer specialties. Now, this kind of information you will find, no doubt, from your Salesforce automation system, and you'll need to go to those people that administrate it for you and request this information from them. Now, let's assume that I've done that, and I have got that information, and here it is. There are my customer specialties, here are my teams, and I'm very simply going to take that information, cut and paste it into the table. And there we go. Couldn't be simpler. Okay. Now, there's quite a few things to look at though once this has been done. Firstly, this table needs to present a full 12 months of activity, and it may be the case that some of your teams haven't existed for that amount of time. So if that is the case in your situation, you need to do a little bit of extrapolation to kind of estimate how many calls each of these teams would be making if they had been there for a full year. We're going to be doing our planning on a full year basis, so we need some kind of understanding of the capacity of these teams to call upon the different customer specialties over that 12-month period. So we must remember that these are 12-month figures. So why are we collecting this information? Well, one of the main reasons for collecting it is because the members, your sales reps belonging to each of these teams, will have formed relationships with the various personnel, with the physicians, the nurses, and all the other customers. And we don't really want to break those relationships in a new kind of Salesforce structure if we need to make your Salesforce larger or smaller. We want to try and keep those relationships if we can. So this table helps us understand that. But it does something else too. It helps us make sure that the information that you gave us a little while ago in terms of the productivity on the team setup and call capacity tab is in sync, if you like, consistent with what we understand the Salesforces to actually be doing. To help us with this consistency check, back on the team setup tab, if we go towards the right, here we go, you remember we have this quality control area, and previously we have checked to make sure that the teams are more or less the same size between two other tabs. But what I want to look at now is this bit down here. Now, the call capacity that we are declaring on this table here, if we multiply out the days in the field, the calls per day, and all the reps in the team, if we multiply all those numbers, we can see that the call capacity of this team is 187,761 calls. Now, we want to make sure that that number is consistent with the historic team activity that we've just provided. And that's exactly what happens here. The table has made that calculation for you. It's added up all the calls that we've just put on the historic team activity tab, and it tells us it comes to 186,494. Now, those numbers are very close, and because they're very close, we're going to let that go and say that that's absolutely fine. Now, if these numbers are very different, you will need to do something. It's quite common that the expectation we have of the productivity on our reps is higher than it actually is, and that can be an issue because we don't want to put too few reps into any new Salesforce structure on the assumption that they are more they have a higher capacity than they actually really have. So it's important that we get this right, and that is why we are making that check. It can also be the case that the Salesforce automation system that provided this historical activity information has perhaps not captured all of the activity that your reps actually do. This can be quite common. Obviously, when you first put a Salesforce automation system in, you may not have 12 months of information being collected. But even if you have such a system installed for several years, it may be the case that we just don't collect all the data that we need, or the reps don't enter all the activity they do. And that can be particularly true for contract teams, depending on the situation you have in getting your contract team on board. You may or may not be able to get information in terms of what your contract team have done in terms of calls. If you have, then that's great, you can put that in. If not, then you might want to enter information here which is consistent with what you've asked that contract team to do. So at least there is something there for the PromoPlanner to use. So if you don't have the actual data for contract teams, then your expectation data should be placed there. And the last use for this historic team activity data is one of comparison. When we start making our new call plan using the planning board inside the PromoPlanner, one of the questions you'll no doubt have is, does this new plan result in more activity or less activity of this team on that customer audience? So we need to have a base, we need to have an understanding of where we start from, and this provides exactly that start point for the activity. So that's it. That's the historic team activity table. Nothing too difficult to do there, but there are a few things to remember. Firstly, they need to be 12 months, and you might need to do a little bit of extrapolation if you don't have 12 months data. For things like your contract team, if you don't have real data for it, then please put in some expectation data at least, so that there is something to work with. And finally, if for any reason you believe, or you have good reason to believe, that your Salesforce automation system does not fully collect all of the activity that your Salesforce actually deploys, then you might want to think about compensating a little on these numbers. And that's it. Thank you.